Welcome to part 2 in a two-part series of podcasts from LSE Life. In part 1, we looked at how to imagine your literature review as a dinner party. In part 2, we'll take this further and look at how to potentially storyboard your whole dissertation. Storyboarding is the process of mapping out or plotting a story. It can be done on paper or computer, and the process of storyboarding allows you to decide what will happen in the story and where. It also helps you to decide what resources will be needed and when, decide how to present the story clearly by making decisions on order of scenes, layout, pivotal moments in the plot, action scenes and twists, etc. When we think of storyboarding, you might think of the example on the right, lots of images of how a particular scene may be filmed. Storyboarding is traditionally used in the arts, in film or theatre for example, so why would you want to use it in academic research? Well, it gives you a visual way to see the whole piece, which is very important and often something we lack when working on our research, as naturally people tend to focus on a section at a time. And it's a chance to break away from a more linear type of thinking. But storyboards can also be a lot more detailed, with notes on the actions in a scene, the dialogue, any visual or special effects. So using them is like creating a prototype for your dissertation. It's a chance to see now where you have plot holes, where you need to spend more time thinking and planning. What is a research storyboard? Well, taking the principles we've just discussed but using them in the context of your research. So mapping sections and subsections out clearly, thinking about what will be needed for each of these sections, perhaps thinking about the amount of time it might take, the potential resources, the key references or arguments you may want to make. You don't need to know what you're doing at each stage. This is the beauty of planning. Your storyboard should be something that you continue to adapt and change as the research develops, but it enables you to always be thinking about the whole thing. You could even get really into it and outline every paragraph if you wanted to. There are two potential levels to storyboarding. You could use storyboarding early on in the process. This could be quite a short storyboard aimed at just giving you the chance to see an overview of the whole picture of your work. Or you could choose to do a really detailed storyboard, which could include details on sections and subsections with short outlines, notes on paragraphs with short summaries of key arguments, notes on placements of things like key references, longer quotations, charts and figures and images. If you want to find out more about storyboarding for research, there is a great blog here from LSE's own Patrick Dunleavy, which you might want to read in more detail when you have a moment. Let's look at how we turn the work in part 1 into a storyboard. If you remember where we were at the end of part 1, I could see 4 potential subsections in my literature review evolving. At that point, they were gender theory, hegemonic masculinity, psychoanalysis, and theories of reading and writing. The next step was to think roughly about how much I'd write for each section. The most practical way to think about this was in terms of potential paragraphs, based on roughly how much content I thought each section may involve. After a rough first go, I then looked at exactly which topics and points I'd need to cover in each subsection. This led to some revision of paragraph numbers, as I realised some sections would need to be bigger than I'd first thought. So what's next? Well, my dinner party plans can now begin to be storyboarded into a more detailed plan of the literature review, which could start to look something like this. As you can see, I've started to think about the literature review as a whole, and I'm imagining I'll dedicate 3,000 words to this section. A quick calculation based on the typical length of paragraphs in my writing means I'm probably looking at around 12 paragraphs. And I've made even further revisions of sections, an exploration of the discussion around masculinities and masculinity, an exploration of the multiple masculinities idea of father and son relationships, and a look at the nature of fathering and the psychological development of fathers and sons, I've thought about my key points and I'm deciding where my key references will go. And then I refine this into even more detail. With each refinement, you can see that things continue to change and move as I think about them further. And this is a good thing. Each revision is making your argument clearer and clearer, so expect this to happen. It's a top-level storyboard at this point. After this, I would probably plot further by also planning out each part and the paragraphs contained in that part in more detail. So want to have a go at creating your own? Well, there are some online programs and apps. You could use Slide Sorter View in PowerPoint, or there are a couple of links here that you might want to try. Or you could do it the old-fashioned way, with paper, post-its, corkboard, a magnetic board with magnets, whiteboard, whatever you have. Or you can download the LSE Life Storyboard handout from this Moodle page. There are benefits to analogue. Research shouldn't be a passive process. This allows you to stand up, move things around, change the layout and get more active. Remember, experiment now while things are still relatively low risk. Where does this normally fit in the dissertation process? Well, early storyboard may be useful to bring to a tutorial with your supervisor after the research area or topic is broadly defined. This will help you and your tutor to discuss your ideas in more detail and for your tutor to see where your ideas might go. After that discussion, you can then refine your ideas into a full storyboard. But it can be helpful at any time in the process, especially if you're stuck. And this is just the beginning. Full storyboarding would mean creating mini versions of all parts of the project. This could include each section and subsection with a short summary, every paragraph with a short summary, perhaps images, perhaps notes on where you're going to put longer quotes or key references, and notes on where you're going to put your charts and figures. And what are the benefits to storyboarding? Well, when we're working on a large piece of independent research, such as a dissertation, a lot of the information can be locked up in our heads. A storyboard helps you begin to get an overview of the potential dissertation as a whole story of your research and not a series of isolated potential ideas. But at the same time, it is also easier to see each section separately in detail, which will then make it easier to think about how you're going to need to plan your time and effort. A thorough storyboard should throw up these things before you fall into them while you're actually writing things up and then need to find a way out. You can see all of your gaps and problems and pitfalls before you fall into them. So you can make changes now when it's all relatively low risk, rather than having to change something you've spent a long time researching and writing up because it no longer works. Thorough planning, however you choose to do it, is never a waste of your time. So how to start your own storyboard? Well, on your first go, you might want to just try a section to storyboard, the literature review, for example, until you're happy with the process. So start by deciding on a rough word count for that section of your dissertation. You may find it helpful at this point to sketch a word count for all of your sections so you can think about how you're going to divide the sections up. If you're not sure how, a rough guideline is most paragraphs fall somewhere between the 200 to 300 word mark. For guidance, on the next slide there are a few potential models of how you could divide up your word count. Remember, there is no one way to do this. You need to decide what word count each section needs to tell the story of your research. And of course, if your department has asked for a specific word count for each section or given you guidelines, this takes precedence over our advice. So if you have no idea where to start with word counts for the various sections, we've given you some examples here. As you can see, it can vary significantly depending on a number of factors, including the story you need to tell and the type of research you're doing. The next step is to look through your notes and decide the potential major points you might want to make. Once you have the major points, think about the key arguments and information you'll need to cover to make that point. If relevant, make notes on the potential references and or resources for that point. And decide how many paragraphs you'll need and deduct this from the total word count for that section. After this, if you want to continue the process, why not consider having an online one-to-one with a study advisor from LSE Life? They're available Monday to Friday, and you can book an appointment via Student Hub. We've also got some good resources on Moodle. Check out our section on Create a Great Dissertation. And webinars. We'll hold a number of these on various dissertation topics over summer term and the summer break. Subscribe to the LSE Life weekly update via the LSE Life webpage to be the first to find out when they're on. We hope you found the advice in these screencasts helpful. Good luck with drafting and writing a literature review, and don't forget to check out our other advice on the LSE Life Moodle page.